Hi, folks, and welcome to UX Leadership by Design, the podcast by and for UX design leaders. I'm your host, Mark Baldino. This podcast is and always will be brought to you by Fuzzy Math, the user experience design consultancy that brings consumer-grade UX to the enterprise. Fuzzy Math delivers award-winning digital product strategy, UI design, and UX design operations services. I'm also a founder, so I'm biased. Today, we're talking to Bryan Garvey, the Associate Director of User Experience and Insights at Radio Systems Corporation. These are the fine folks that bring you pet products you know, like PetSafe and Invisible Fence. Bryan takes us through his multi-year journey to get design a seat at the table. We cover some incremental steps in what is really a long game, again, multi-year journey at driving organizational change. And we'll make some stops along the way at things like the art of stakeholder management, empathizing with stakeholders and other members of your team, and really how he enables a push mindset for his team. I feel it's a great must listen for our fellow design leaders, so super excited about it. Let's go. Welcome, Bryan. How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I am doing very well. Thank you for joining us on the podcast today.
My pleasure.
So I have down here that you're the Associate Director of User Experience and Insights at Radio Systems Corporation. Give us a little bit of background. What's that all about? How did you land in that position? And as we talk about sort of UX journeys, I'm always interested in hearing how people went from a practitioner of UX to shifting into kind of a lead or management role. So I think the audience would love to hear about sort of your journey.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea for a series because everyone comes into it differently, and I'm always interested in those paths. So I came to Radio Systems in 2015. So been there a little over 7.5 years. First brought on because they didn't have any UX at the company, and first wanted it focused on the website to elevate the experience of their website, their e-com and branded sites, because the company actually owns multiple brands in the pet product and sporting dog area. Radio systems is kind of a funny term these days because it refers to sort of a core technology that was built almost 30 years ago at least, and we've kind of grown and made lots of other things, but never bothered to update the parent brand. I really focused on the other brands like Invisible Fence and PetSafe. But as I was seeing how the teams were working, I put together several presentations with the website teams on the better way to work between design and development. Because at the time it was still more of a let's lob some designs over the wall to development, see what we get. And I pitched a more modern collaborative way and kind of gave a UX 101 and why you want to pay attention to those things and the value it creates. And the head of the group at the time asked if that could be applied to our physical products as well.
Oh, interesting.
Because
so somebody heard your UX 101 and they drew the connection between like marketing, e-com to physical products.
Yep. Because I guess because I was talking about it conceptually.
Yeah, interesting. Well done.
We were kind of restarting our Internet of Things program because of an attempt that didn't go so well in the marketplace. And that's where I first started working sort of a crossover, software and the physical product.
Yep.
And everyone really liked how that went and asked if there were more people out there that did what I did. It really wanting to free me up to be able to work on more things is kind of how we started making a case for more resources and an actual department.
Did you have to continue to support the marketing as you were moving and the e-com side as you were moving off to other stuff? Like, did you have to say, I'm going to keep doing this while we kind of grow the team and scale how we're serving the business?
Yes, still do. In fact, the title, my actual title isn't Associate Director of User Experience and Insights. I say that because it makes a little bit more sense to people is what I do. But the reality is because of how this has progressed, like they didn't even, my title wasn't even UX when I started because they didn't have it at the company. Yeah. And so my titles have always lagged. And I think that's interesting. And I've tried not to get hung up on it too much, because if you are pushing and growing something like this in an organization, that's just going to happen. If they don't have that sort of framework already laid out, I mean, I think right now my title says something about digital product, and I work,
Oh, really? Okay.
quite a bit on the physical hardware. Um, and so perhaps with the next title change, it'll catch up a little bit. But um, I feel like ideally, if I'm doing a good job in pushing forward in the company, I'll be involved with more things than the title can say. So, and in fact, I kind of take that title thing and applied it to the UX group and the research group, that everyone has either research and insights analyst, or they have UX UI designer. Even though one of my UX people may be really focused on research, and one of them may be really focused on app UI, instead of creating dedicated roles, we just have one title that allows us to sort of find the specific skill sets we need at the time, and it's so far worked out pretty well.
What's that component of like insights? I don't know if you like, I see like consumer insights, like that feels sometimes more marketing. Although I think as practitioners of user and human-centered design, like we are drawing insights. Like, is that your personal bent? Is that kind of, I don't want to say this, like PR in terms of like, hey, this is what my team does? Or is it something internal that like there's an insights role? Although it sounds like the roles are like role titles are a little more technical. Like where'd that insights label come from? And seems like it's stuck around.
So at the time I was building up the UX group, there was a research group that was growing, and the person leading that had a background in more the consumer research side of things, and really focused a lot on quant, things like that. And the owner of that group was trying to, influence hiring in more people who would be more user centric, and have sort of a mixed methods approach. Eventually, I took over that team and kind of took what they were doing and made it bring in more UX research, I guess. And because at the time we weren't doing a lot with market research anyway. As a company, we were really focused on updating our product development, and having that sort of mixed methods approach gave much more actionable information to the categories and the product teams to be able to make decisions. And so we changed, sending out a product and then asking a survey into, iterative prototype testing, using a platform that allows us to see diaries and have live interviews. There was a big push at the time not to have an inside out sort of approach to product ideation, and that everything needed to be based on an insight. And so that's also part of where the name Insights came from. Interestingly enough, now we're going through some growth and change, and there is a huge new focus on marketing and brand positioning. And so we are actually having a lot more need for that consumer research side of things, and that level of insights that we're navigating and figuring out how to expand the teams.
And your team will expand to fill that gap on the kind of consumer research market research.
Initially, at least, we'll see if it ends up that we need a product practical focused group, and then a market trend type group. Yep. But for now, that's where we are. And so backing up right now, I have the UX group, which does our app, our native apps, our websites, our branded websites, and our physical product UIs. And then I also have the research group, which does persona segmentation, that level of stuff, all the way down to coordinating product testing with customers. And then the industrial design group. So really a lot of the pieces of the product experience, working with engineers and categories and everyone else it takes to bring these
really end to end
to
market.
Right? Yeah, really touch points throughout the entire build process.
So that's where you are now. When you started over here, you're now like really far. You sound your approach, which is make a presentation, sort of explain what you do, but sounds like a lot of I'm going to go try stuff and show results. But is it a lot of two steps forward, one step back? Like, how long did the journey take where you're now saying, oh, we're going to double back to marketing, but in the meantime, we're doing basically all digital customer experience. We're doing physical, product design. Like, that's an amazing range for your team. Like, that sounds, I don't want to say ideal, but it sounds like an amazing space to work and an amazing space to lead. But what did that journey take? How long did it take? Am I describing it as correctly, two steps forward, one step back? Like, it sounds incremental, which is impressive.
Yeah, it sounds like you know how this stuff goes. Been very fortunate that the company is a mid-sized company that it has sort of a startup mentality still. It was that way at some point, and it's always been a sort of if you have an idea and you want to push it, you can do that. Because there's just always opportunities. Right now, as we're maturing, we're looking at codifying processes and things, but it's still got that sort of if you want to step forward and do the work and make your case, you'll be heard. So, like in a lot of places, I would find the people who recognize the value in this and how it can contribute, and kind of focused on them versus the people who are used to doing things, the way they'd always done it.
Can you
And
just pause
yeah,
there? Like, that is, I think, a really interesting insight because I think design leaders struggle, right? They face some people supportive, not supportive. Sometimes they don't know who to go to, so they stay in the same cycle and deliver great design. But like, how did you find those right people? Like, what was the quality criteria? This person's going to listen. They're going to take this seriously. They're going to give me a little bit of room. I don't know, maybe a little bit of budget to like trial. So how did you identify them? And then what did you have to come back with to just sort of prove value, ROI, that sort of stuff?
great questions. Um, I think that, well, for overall, and I tell them, the people that work in my group, the same thing is if you find yourself arguing about the value of what you do, you're kind of lost already,
Mm.
right? If you're having these abstract, um, sort of philosophical level, this is why I should be here. This is why you should listen to me. That's not the conversation you need to be in, because the right people aren't wanting to talk about that. The right people want to talk about what can they do next. The way I've sort of followed it in my path with the current company is that, first I had that, executive that said, can you apply this to other things? And then a lot of it was, well, here's this software manager over here who says, I'm dying for some UX help over here. We're just getting these requirements, and we're just making whatever, but we want it to be better. Or there is a category person who says, I want to try building this different way. I saw this video where someone did a design studio. Yeah, I can help you with that. Or an executive that came back from doing a crash course at the Stanford D School. So does anybody interested in this stuff wants to help me talk about this? You know, always just like looking for those types of conversations, and really just talking to people around the company about what they're working on and what their pain points are. And there are plenty of people who are like, no, we're good, we're fine. What is it you do? And that's fine. You don't crusade around everyone about, this is what research is, this is what UX is, this is what industrial design should be doing. Find the people who know that and say, what do you have coming up and how can I help you? It's a real basic way
Yeah,
of doing that. And it's beneficial because in the beginning, I kept hearing it said, don't be like peanut butter spread too thin across the org, because then you'll just be diluted. And it actually works to your benefit to only focus on a couple areas and let everything else go, to show that, yeah, this is valuable here.
fantastic. And I know I kind of cut you off in your journey because I wanted to focus in on that. Like, who are the right folks I need to be talking to within my organization? How do I identify them, make progress? You're talking about kind of the longer journey to go from e-commerce to really, a pretty broad set of services. And apologize for cutting you off there, but I wanted to dive in a little bit. So find the right people, make incremental progress. What else about that journey to get you to where your team is now?
Yeah. So, and I'll add that the people you want to find are either people who, like, the software developer manager who will not move forward, without, a good inputs. or the people who actually are making the decisions. The biggest strides we've made is, the person in charge of our apps on the development side getting direct requests and then saying, no, you have to go through the UX group. Once that starts happening, then you start really making some progress. So, going back to your 2 steps forward, 1 step back as well. Yeah. What you'll find is that you have the success with this one group. Other people will say, okay, I want the success, or a leader will say, okay, everyone has to use, research, everyone has to use UX, but they don't know how or why. So you start working with this next group, doing your process, and it feels like you're starting all over again, because suddenly they're like, where's your timeline? Where's your list of deliverables? And it's like, well, that's not how this part works. And they're like, I don't get it. I need to see this. Okay, well, all right, let's step back. Right. And that's been sort of a frustrating thing to say, okay, you had the success, you expect that work of evangelizing is over, but it kind of never is. You always have either new groups or you have new leaders cycling in. And so some aspect of that will always be there.
What's an additional challenge there with folks? Like if you find what I would call like friendlies, people open to it, maybe have seen the process before, their process is broken, so they're, we really need some help here. When you're doing that more pure evangelization, like what are some of the challenges there, and how do you get around them? Is it still let me do this process, I'm going to show, as opposed to tell? Don't talk about value, which I think is an interesting one, because a lot of designers will. I don't know how many slides I put together about the value of UX. So what's that? Yeah. These new evangelizing opportunities, right? How are they different? What are some of the challenges there?
Well, the challenge is always knowing which part of the funnel you want to focus on, right? For what the person's dealing with, what problem they're trying to solve. Because at the end of the day, you're still always going to face the fact that they could just go ahead and launch something without taking the time to understand the problem, without taking the time to iron out these details. Because a lot of times they do seem like small details, and there's success that happens by launching and course correcting. And so that'll always be there. And in some cases, that's actually not a bad route. And so it's dialing into what problems that they need solving, they are, struggling with at the time. It's not always that you have to have this perfectly seamless experience. Sometimes it is, I need to understand actually where the issues are, or I'm having trouble communicating these requirements to the technical team, wherever that is. And so sometimes the presentation is like, here's the problem you're having. If you let us do this work, you don't even have to worry about that. That problem goes away. So it's, sort of diving into that. If you're talking to more the executive level, it's like, this is the money you're losing, right, by doing it this way. Here's this, what we've been able to do that saved money there, which is also very difficult sometimes, because when everything's designed really well, it just works right. And if something is easy to use, if something just works, well, that feels like that's how it's supposed to be. It feels like that was easy to do when, historically, and it's the inverse, right, in terms of the work that goes into it. So that's always, kind of a challenge. But that's why evangelizing looks more like, this is some things that we're doing, and this is the value it adds to you. This is the pain point it removes for you.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
And it sounds like, I think designers in general, they want to focus on the end user, the customer, and really good at empathizing with those folks. I think sometimes designers, and myself as well, it's like you have to empathize with the people you're working alongside of. Yes. In my world, it's clients, but sometimes designers, internal designers. And for your team, it's fellow, it's key stakeholders. It could be executives. Like that's a whole nother skill set of empathizing with those around you. It's very easy to kind of, take evangelization to like the bully pulpit, right? Like this is the only way to get it done. You have to do these 10 steps. No, I'm not even engaging this group if they don't want to do primary user research. Like we can get really high on our horse and say, this is the one and only way. But your approach, which is let's step back and look at what are the acute pain points that this group or this person is facing? How can we leverage design to solve for that? So am I, first of all, describing that correctly? Is that level of like stakeholder conversations, stakeholder research, stakeholder consulting a big part of your team's role?
It really is, and there's divided opinions on it, and I've
Okay.
heard those opinions even within the org,
Mm.
within other people who want to see the work that aren't even in the group, that want to see the work being pushed much further ahead because they're ready for change, right? And of course, there's people in the group. It's actually a significant challenge working at a hardware based company that is getting into software, and you're recruiting all these digitally minded people who are ready to launch, ready to learn, and oh well, this is a 3-year product cycle. It can feel like a slog at sometimes, and so you really have to focus on the wins and the things that you are pushing forward. So it can a lot of times feel like we've been pushing to change this, and people are still behaving the same. You have to step back and say, okay, well, a year ago we weren't even invited to these meetings, right? Today we're leading the meeting, right? Like that's significant. In a lot of places that doesn't get to happen. And so a big piece of that, one of our um, 3 pillars of the group is understand the business. I always tell anyone wherever you work, you should be able to articulate the value you bring to the business. I said earlier you don't want to begin a fight about it, but you should be able to articulate it. And I think that with that mindset, understanding the business is how you understand the problems, right? Why is this category manager um, suddenly making this call on what the product should do when you feel like that's your role? Well, they suddenly have a new date. They have to get, to get this product for PetSmart or Walmart, whoever, to take it, right? That's really driving to them, because if they don't hit that, then there's no product. So if you understand that, then you can say, okay, we can understand we can't do things perfectly and by the book according to even our own set of guidelines for usability or whatever, but here's the best thing we can do in this situation. Doing that means the next time they have something roll around, like, hey, we want to get you all in earlier. I know you said before you didn't have enough time to do things. I do want to get things earlier because I saw what happened when we kind of pushed things at the last minute. It's a long game,
Yeah.
in a way, and you have to be ready for that. And some people don't have the patience for it. But the flip side, that is why we get to, you know, get listened to and get some of the seats at the table we have.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think the long game is important and really hard. It's hard to play. So, congrats to you, Bryan, for playing it for a number of years.
Somewhat of a
And
masochist, yeah.
yeah. But it's got to be a challenge to hire people that have that mindset, maybe teach that mindset, retain them, and say, hey, this is going to be a little bit of a struggle for a few months, but hey, I promise you, next time around, we'll get started earlier. Like, what are some of the challenges with the team? Because you probably have a push and a pull here, which is we are playing the long game, but we also need to, like, at times go, and we want to push change. Like, is there a tension there? How are you managing that tension?
Well, I'd be interested in the team's perspective on this, because I hear quite a bit about it. Yeah, it is tough to manage. I think that one of the benefits we have is that we get to do some of the research and some of the UX design and the testing that a lot of places talk about, right? Even at some of these larger places, you get in there and it's still like crank it out, crank it out, crank it
Yeah.
out. And we do have the benefit of doing it. And part of, we don't have that many people given how many touch points we cover in the company. But because of the cycles and things, it gives an opportunity to, if we didn't get to do exactly what I want to hear, okay, there's this other thing that's kind of waiting. Let's take those learnings and go over here. There's an opportunity to push more ownership. You're going to own this piece of it. You're going to lead this session. Here's how we're going to set you up for success and
Yeah.
how we're going to support you, as opposed to here's your task, crank out these screens. And getting to learn some of those skills of how, we talk a lot about stakeholder management. We talk a lot about facilitating. We talk about a lot about how do you manage a difficult conversation in a meeting where you're going on for a little bit on your plan, and then suddenly an engineer says, well, that'll never work because of X. And then suddenly everyone's like, okay, well, if the engineer says it doesn't work, how that doesn't mean the end of it. How do you recover from that instead of getting flustered? And I think that people appreciate, learning those skills that they're going to be able to take wherever they go. I hope that that's, part of the reason we're able to have a pretty good retention. In fact, the people, a couple of people who have left to go into other places have given me feedback that what they learned working with this team, perfectly set them up for working at this larger company, being in charge of a design system. We work with the writers in our
Okay.
group. Uh, a bunch of them just left to become UX writers. They started off writing product pages or
Interesting.
manuals, and so
That's cool. That's great. See the career development. It's no better compliment than somebody coming back after they've left your team and said, I learned A, B, and C, and I'm applying it, in X,
yeah,
Y, and
that's
Z.
the best.
That's fantastic. Do you try to develop, like, do you summarize, like, maybe the mindset you're looking for in your team that you're sort of trying to develop in your designers?
Yeah, particularly on anything that's related to design. If there's a role there, a presentation is a must for the interview. That's one of our requirements. And what that is presenting a project you worked on in the past.
Okay.
We don't make anyone do any spec work or give any sample projects. I'm firmly against that. Because if you present something you worked on, we're naturally going to see how you articulate your decisions.
Yeah.
We're naturally going to see and have an opportunity to ask about the things you had to overcome to get certain things through, because those are the key things that we're doing day to day.
Yep.
Right. Every one of us has to be able to articulate the decision and the why on any given day. Right. And someone who has that growth mindset, who, I took this on because I wanted to learn this, or this was a challenge, but I liked it because of this. And, one of our screener questions is always, trying to figure out, are you moving away from something? Or are you moving towards something? What is the value you think you can get here, to make sure that we're able to grow you? One of our mantras is, or, mine as a manager and a director is, my role is to prepare you for your next role. Hopefully that's here in our company, but it won't always be. And I think that gets across the idea that we're here to develop you. And people who are eager to do that, you can spot those. That's that growth mindset. Those are the people who are going to be willing to push because they see what it unlocks and what it allows them to do, versus people who, just want to come in and do their work and leave.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. It just doesn't work, in our environment.
Awesome. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you for bringing the listeners along on your journey. I think, a summarization here is it is a long journey, and you got to play the long game if you really want to shift the internal culture and processes. Specifically, when, as you mentioned, briefly, you're talking about hardware design with really long sort of delivery schedules. As a way to wrap, I'd like to include sort of resources, articles, books that have helped design leaders develop. Any you would recommend our fellow design leaders to give a read or listen to?
Yeah, my number one book is always Crucial Conversations. So actually, the UX team is doing a little book club on it right now.
Oh, nice.
I think that that's really the heart of so much of what we're doing. It goes over a framework, really, and it's interesting because it's really stuff we know as designers and researchers in terms of, something happens, there's a reaction to it, right? But actually, there's something happens. We tell ourselves a story about it, right? And then we react to the story of what that means. And it has a lot of good examples in the book of how that plays out in the workplace. You're trying to get approval for this new homepage design, and you're on a tight timeline, and suddenly the stakeholder starts asking why the buttons have square corners instead of rounded.
Yeah.
And you just lose your mind, right? And
Yeah.
and you react. If you react poorly in that moment, you've lost so much of what you've worked towards. And so little ways, things of like handling those types of conversations, things where people are in disagreement, or the thing you're pushing is advocating for is a difficult conversation to have, or it feels that way because you you're the designer coming in to suggest maybe we extend the timeline or things like that. It takes the personal aspect out of it and the feelings out of it and focus on facts. So that just one alone, I think, is really important. Most particularly as you get into leadership, because as you get into leadership, it becomes so much more about your work. It happens through people relationships, even when most of it's focused on your team. The biggest struggle I see people have moving from individual contributor into leadership, well, I'll say management, because I think everyone can be a leader, but it is letting go of, your value was in this craft. Now your value is in this relationship, still tied to the craft.
Yeah.
And suddenly those conversations were like, oh, this was really easy. I don't understand why this person's taking this long. Suddenly now it becomes, a difficult conversation to have with someone. But if you approach it with the right framework, you get the results that you want, with the team that you're leading.
Fantastic. All right, Bryan, I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. Thanks for sharing the resource and some final words of wisdom. I've learned a ton, even in the last few moments. I think I need to pick up that book. People who know me, I can be a little bit passionate at times, and I think separating myself sometimes from, taking things personally is like something I'm always working on. So appreciated your time today. I'll include a link to those resources when we get this posted, but just want to say thank you again for your time and for sharing your journey with our listeners.
Fantastic. Thanks for asking me.
Thank you.